we begin in the Middle East as President Trump considers military options against Iran, fighting flares in Syria, and diplomacy intensifies over Gaza. Now, new questions are emerging about who will shape the next phase of Middle East peace. CBN's Joshua Swanson brings us the story from Jerusalem.
President Donald Trump spoke directly with the president of Syria amid growing concerns over ISIS detainees, regional instability, and renewed fighting in the country's northeast.
The president of Syria is working very, very hard. Strong guy, tough guy, pretty rough resume. But you're not going to put a choir boy in there and, get the job done. I spoke with him yesterday because we were talking about the prisons and, what was going on. We have some of the worst terrorists in the world in those prisons.
Syria's government and the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces announced a new four-day truce after a previous ceasefire collapsed. The two sides have been clashing for 2 weeks following a breakdown in negotiations over a plan to merge their two forces. The violence has raised alarms over thousands of ISIS detainees held in a prison camp in the region. It's unclear if some terrorists escaped when Kurdish forces withdrew their guards, and the U.S. is pressuring Syria to maintain security. Meanwhile, attention is turning back to Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu confirmed receiving an invitation to join President Trump's proposed Board of Peace, but raised objections to other nations, including sponsors of Hamas.
Turkish soldiers and the Qatari soldiers will not be in the Strip. We have a certain disagreement with our friends in the United States regarding the composition of the Advisory Council, as it's called, the Advisory Council that will accompany the process in Gaza.
U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff defended the effort.
I think we have overwhelming support, overwhelming. Everybody believes that this is the pathway to bringing people together and being egalitarian about the decisions. The president wants to save lives, and this is going to be a very important platform.
A signing ceremony for the Board of Peace is planned this week at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani confirmed his country's invitation. The region is still on edge as the Iranian regime continues its bloody crackdown on protesters. A U.S. carrier strike force continues to make its way to the Middle East, and President Trump is reportedly seeking military options from his advisors against Iran, including toppling the regime. In one of its strongest responses yet, Iran says it will fight back with everything we have. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Joshua. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is with us now from Jerusalem. Chris, President Trump reportedly looking for decisive military options against Iran. What do we know about that so far?
Well, Wendy, it looks like decisive options is kind of the mode of operations for President Trump. He doesn't want a long campaign. So what can he do? He can hit regime targets. I talked to a military expert earlier today. He actually suggested the possibility of a naval blockade or even hit the oil facilities in Iran. That's Iran's economic lifeline. We do know that there are people in the region, Qatar in particular, trying to stop the attack. But right now, we just see all these assets, military assets in the region, the Abraham Lincoln, which should be in range in about 48 hours, perhaps. Also, the F-15s refueling planes as well. So it looks like it could be a decisive, military strike against the regime. We'll just see if it's enough, along with the protests internally, to topple the regime.
And Chris, you attended a key defense briefing today in Israel. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was the head of the Ministry of Defense Research and Development. We were down there in what's called a Kiryat, which is Israel's basically Pentagon. And they talked about the Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow 3, 4, and 5. These are all the anti-missile layers of protection here in Israel. And one of the things he talked about is that they also, Israel, that is, wants to be a superpower in space. And so that is part of their research and development right now. He also talked, Wendy, about the Iron Beam. And this is it's almost like Star Wars, this laser that can shoot down. It already had been operational in the war against Hezbollah. It shot down 42 UAVs. and drones, and that is going to be now put on various platforms, land, sea, and air, and they're working on the next generation. They also talked about how fast they work, Wendy. They work with startup companies, they work with the United States, but developed these weapon systems that really are almost science fiction, but they become science faction. He also made the point that since October 7th, believe it or not, there were 43,000 missiles, UAVs, and drones shot at Israel since October 7th. Just a massive assault, and that's the reason for the Iron Beam, Iron Dome, and all these anti-missile systems.
That's hard to even comprehend, 43,000. Wow. Well, what about the Kurds? We haven't talked much about the Kurds lately. What is the latest on their situation?
Well, it's precarious right now, Wendy. There's a demonstration we know today at the U.S. Embassy by many Kurdish people. There's a feeling among many of the Kurds that I've heard or seen talk about that the U.S. really has given up on the Kurds and allowed al-Jilani, or al-Shaara, the new president of Syria, to go ahead and take over this area called Northeast Syria that had been autonomous, that had been a democracy, and that really had been a beacon of stability right here in the heart of the Middle East. The forces that are going in there right now, Wendy, are jihadists, and they have demonstrated that earlier in the regime when they went against the Alawites, when they get against the Druze. Now they're going against the Kurds, and it seems like many of them, are committing atrocities. We see videos of killing wantonly. We see kidnapping women. So it's very, very difficult situation in there for the Kurds in northeast Syria. And many Kurds from Turkey and Iraq are actually heading there to help fight their brothers. They're right against the regime.
Interesting. Well, Chris, what can you tell us about the controversy about Qatar being invited to join President Trump's Board of Peace?
Well, the feeling over some people over here, Wendy, is that they say Qatar is Hamas, Hamas is Qatar. They have funded Hamas for years. They have had their leadership in Doha for years, and all part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the sense is that they may work to help Hamas survive, this going into the next phase in the reconstruction of Gaza. So that's really a concern here that Qatar, that for years, since October 7th, has really been playing both sides, being an arsonist, trying to foment Hamas, but also being a mediator. And so this is a big concern over here about Qatar's role.
Chris and Leslie, are there concerns Hamas could use the president's Gaza plan to rebuild?
Well, that's exactly what some people are saying. It'd be a recipe for Hamas's survival or revival. And what about disarming Hamas and demilitarizing Gaza? Those are the things that, those are the main goals of the war since the very beginning. Netanyahu said that in the Knesset. And will it be done? We don't know. Netanyahu said it's going to be done either the easy way or the hard way. We'll see right now. But there is a push to go ahead with phase 2. And the concern here is that it may, as they go forward in phase 2, leave the fact that Hamas still remains armed and dangerous.
So much going on there in the Middle East where you are, Chris. Thanks for keeping an eye on it for us. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.